Hey, I'm ZSH Plays. Welcome back to San Bernardino Zoo, where today we are completing our Madagascar area with a habitat for the beautiful but secretive Fossa. Today's episode is going to be all about building a habitat that fits perfectly into the space that we have available. So you can see here, this is the area that we have for the Fossa habitat. Got enough space to build a habitat to satisfy the game's requirements, but it is going to be a tight fit because I want some Madagascar-inspired architecture as well as the habitat itself, and that's what we're going to build first. The architecture in Madagascar is really interesting because the first people to populate Madagascar did not come from Africa, as you might expect considering its location. They actually came from Indonesia, so the predominant architectural styles in Madagascar are actually closely related to Indonesian architecture rather than an African architecture, although with a bit of an African twist. It's actually quite a basic construction, the main houses in Madagascar, so I'm building most of this on the grid, which is very unusual for this zoo, but nice to be able to put something together quickly on the grid on the rare occasions that you get the chance. What we're building here is a traditional Madagascan style house, which has the really steep pointed roof that you might expect in Indonesian architecture, and then their own unique twist on it, which are poles that extend from the roof up to form a point in the air above the house, which is something I really like. I've used this technique before when building a lemur habitat. It just looks really cool and it's really unique, so definitely wanted to get that into this build. So I'm using these African pole pieces to do that job. We'll just get a couple of them here and extend one of them up past the roof, and then we'll put some on the other side and form the cross motif that is the most unique part of Madagascan architecture. Get this nice and high so it's visible even from guest level, and this building is going to be the guest viewing. So we'll copy these poles all the way across the edges of the building, and then we'll copy them to the other side as well. This is exactly how the reference image I was looking at looked. And the other unique feature is that regardless of the terrain and regardless of where the house is, it tends to be built on stilts so that it's off the ground. Now, if this was a real house, there would be stairs going up and the whole house would be on the sort of second level with the pole suspending it above the ground. But no need to do that for this habitat. So we're going to have the guests actually going underneath this. So the sides of the building will be open, which will keep it nice and airy, but also provide shelter for the guests from the Californian sunshine, which is something I'm trying to get more of into the zoo. So we're using these big logs as the stilts, and then we're going to get some of the Arctic wood in to create a border around the bottom of the walls where they join on to the logs, just to bring things together. Thank you so much, by the way, for all your suggestions on zoos for me to visit last week. I got so many in the comments. I think there was about 50 different zoos mentioned. As I record this, the top zoos are Zoo Leipzig in Germany, Burgers Zoo in the Netherlands, and Tiergarten Schönbrunn in Austria, with a lot of recommendations as well for Blijdorp, Paradise, Zoo Zurich, the Bexibellen, Copenhagen, Wildlands Adventure Park, so many zoos. I am definitely going to be picking one or two of those to go and visit, and then I'll have a couple of new zoo tours on the channel for you as well, so thanks for all your suggestions. I'm just moving the building into what's going to be its final position, making sure it's far enough away from the lemur walkthrough so that people can get out there and then get into here. You can see how close it is to some of the staff buildings. We'll be moving those later. There we go, I think that'll do it. Onto the habitat. So we're going to be building another aviary style habitat here. Fossas are very good at climbing. So like a lot of climbing cats, they're normally kept in habitats that are meshed over. And we're actually going to use the same basic piece that we created for the lemurs, but in a very different way. So what we're going to do is get it out to the right size so that we've got the correct depth in the habitat. That looks good. And then we're going to curve each piece so that the roof of the aviary actually curves down towards the ground and follows the line of the roof here. So we'll rotate this piece and check the angle of the mesh against the roof, which is incredibly hard to do because the mesh is pretty much invisible from this angle. We'll get it as close as we can, move it into the correct position, and then check that mesh again. Still not quite right, so again, just a little bit more rotation, get the angle exact. There we go, and then we'll just move it down, sink it into the roof, and bring it in to exactly line up with the other piece of mesh next to it. And then we can just repeat that down the length of the roof on both sides until we have a completed aviary. I wish Frontier would give us more mesh, triangular mesh pieces, circular mesh pieces, hanging mesh pieces, just more mesh of any description. It would make building habitats like this so much easier. We're just going to put the final pieces of mesh on the end of the habitat, got it at a slight angle so it looks more like it is hanging rather than being perfectly straight. And that's the basics of the guest viewing and the habitat done. Let's get on to the barriers. I've put null barriers all around the habitat, and we're going to turn this one here into the main glass viewing window. So we'll line this up with these logs here, make sure it's nice and centered so it looks natural, and then we'll do the same on the other side. And then we will increase the height of all the barriers so that they reach up and above the wood, so everything is nice and seamless. And then we're going to have a little peek through for kids on this side as well. So we're going to turn this into wood to stop people from standing in the places where you don't want them to watch. And then we'll put some more dividers in so that we get a little window just here. And we'll turn this one into glass, and later on we'll do some designing to actually make that look like a peek through. Then we're going to go into the main part of the habitat and start planting it up. We're going to go through this part really quickly because we're going to be using pretty much the same plants as we did in the lemur habitat for obvious reasons. Going to introduce a few new ferns and things like that. Want it really, really busy in here. Fossas are shy, they like cover. I've seen them in a couple of zoos, Singapore Zoo and Chester Zoo, although I didn't actually see the one in Singapore Zoo. They are, like I say, pretty secretive, but their habitats tend to be very busy, lots and lots of plants going on so that they can get out of sight whenever they want to. And you're pretty lucky if you actually spot a fossa in zoos from what I've seen. I was at the one in Chester Zoo for a long time. There was a female and I think 3 pups in there. And eventually I caught a quick glimpse of the female and that was it. And like I say, in Singapore Zoo, I didn't see them at all. Onto the climbing. Big feature of fossa habitats, they love to climb, and in game they really, really like to climb. They climb a lot more than pretty much any other animal in the game, I think, which is kind of strange considering how little climbing the koalas and monkeys do. So I want to make that a big feature of this habitat. So we're going to use the climbing logs and make a really long climbing frame for them, nice and simple, nothing too complex. Try and avoid too much of the glitchy animations that you can get with climbing. I just want a really long log that goes along past this viewing window and then down to the other side, so that's their main way of traversing this habitat. And you'll see in the cinematics the fossa really likes to use these. It is just going to be one fossa in here because I want to keep it a realistic size, and if you've just got the one fossa we can get away with a fairly small habitat like this. If I have a couple in and allow them to breed, it wouldn't need to be that much bigger than this, but it would need to have a whole lot less plants in it, and that will ruin the kind of whole concept of it. So we're just going to go with the one here. Last touch for this climbing frame is just getting some vertical logs in and positioning them in such a way that it looks like they are holding up the logs that they'll be climbing on. They're such unique animals, fossas. They've got such a long tail, really, really long, much longer than a cat's tail would be. I'm looking forward to seeing them using this climbing frame to its full potential. And we're going to have one more at the back as well. This is similar to the one that we had in the caracal habitat, but we're using completely different rocks to build it. Just gives a climbing platform, makes sure that they come up here and it counts towards their climbing space. And we put some rocks around it, so even though we're using the climbing platforms and one of the climbing ramps, it looks really natural when it's finished. We'll quickly change the colour to get it darker and just a bit more fitting with what we want, and then we're going to drop in some of the tree roots just to get a different texture in here and fill in some of these gaps. Once we get the colour right on these tree roots, it really adds something extra to this, give us a nice impressive pile of rocks to have at the back of the habitat. And then we're also going to change the colour of the climbing platforms that are in here as well, just so that everything melds together and it looks like one cohesive piece. And from back where the guests are going to see this from, looks really good, really natural and really cohesive. So I'm going to finish the rest of the planning off camera and then I will show you. This is what we've got. Looking really good. I'm going to put even more on this in a bit, but it's starting to get that really dense look that I want for the habitat. Let's add some detail to the guest building. We're going to use one of the fossa statues so that we've got one actually climbing that pole there. We'll put one of the fossa signs up on the top. This is the entrance where the guests are going to come into from the lemur walkthrough. So we'll put a sign up here as well, and then some of the tropical plant panels to act as the backdrop for it. We'll do a lot of copying of this and then spin it around every time we use it so we don't get any repeating patterns. I'll do some work on the sign as well so that the colours stand out a bit more and do our usual trick of copying it behind itself numerous times to make it three-dimensional. And that's everything that we really need to do for the entrance. There we go, looking nice. Let's move inside and take care of some more detailing. So we're going to use these wood panels all the way down the front of the habitat to join the glass viewing areas and the wall onto the path here so we don't have any gaps, and that all looks nice and seamless. The terrain starts to go up here towards the Indian forest, so we'll just move this one piece up a tiny bit, You don't really notice it, but just make sure it's nice and visible all the way down. And then we'll do the little peek through for the kids that I spoke about. So we're going to use more of these log pieces and just freehand in a vaguely circular kind of viewing window right down at kids' viewing level. So little kids will be able to look straight into it, and bigger kids will be able to see into it as well. Adults can see into it if they want to bend down. If you didn't see it on our community wall, by the way, I uploaded all the custom Madagascan plants onto the workshop on Wednesday, so you can go in and grab them, just search ZSH Plays Madagascar, and you'll find them. There's 4 custom plants altogether, just arranged in a group so that you can add them to any Madagascan habitats that you have, or any habitat really. They're pretty generic, should look good in most habitats, I would think. It's been a while since a workshop Wednesday. Unfortunately, neither the lion habitat or penguin cove wanted to turn into blueprints, mainly because of the amount of water. Obviously the paths aren't in there. Try as I might, I just could not get them to work when they were placed down as blueprints after I'd saved them. So apologies, it's been a while since we had one of those, but the Madagascan plants were a lot simpler, so they worked really nicely. Next up is a little rest and viewing area for the guests. So where this building juts out here, we're going to put some benches in and a bin, all from the Oceania pack, which is FlexiColor, which is great. There we go. And then we'll cover up this little hole in the path with a decal and change all the colours on here to match the path that we've got. And then we're going to put some stalactite rocks in around the curve of this path here to start a little garden, which is going to go behind the benches. You can see a lot of the staff areas here, and they're not going to be blocked out, so I want to make sure that this area looks really good, even though it's just a little staff area, because the guests can see into it. We want to make sure it looks nice. There is one issue with this little area though, which is there is a lot of paths going on here, and they're all staff paths to stop the guests from getting up there, and they are not very attractive, and that means it's time for franchise masters. The best way to cover up loads of paths that you can't get rid of, such as these staff paths, is just to use loads and loads of concrete. So you get the concrete roof piece, change the colour so it's darker, and then just place it down all over the area that you want to cover up. Don't worry too much about accuracy at this moment. Once you've got the basics in, then switch to using the concrete panels. Some of those are really small, and they enable you to exactly fill in the gaps and join them onto the area that you're already happy with. And in the space of about 5 minutes, the big mess of an area that you had looks perfect. And speaking of perfect, this build is pretty much done. Just a few more plants to join it onto the Indian forest, and we can check it out. Let's take a look. Here we go. We've made some improvements to that sign. Really stands out now. It looks great against the tropical plant background. And here's the habitat. We've got the little peek through. We've got that big viewing window for the adults. And this is the little rest area. Looks really nice with all that concrete that we added in. Got the educator wandering around from the lemurs as well. Let's check out the Fossa. Here he is on his climbing frame. Really like that. You can just see into the Indian forest in the background as well. Designed that so you can't really see into this habitat from there. And you can see all the plants that keeps the Fossa nice and hidden when it wants to be. He seems to be very chilled in there and spends a lot of time up on this climbing frame. Looks really cool. They're kind of slightly scary looking and really cute looking at the same time. I hid a rubbing pad for him to use underneath the climbing frame, and then lots of high spots in the habitat like this for him to survey his surroundings. And we got one of the skittle feeders as well, which he likes to jump on. Let's take an overview of the whole area now that it's complete. Love how that slots in behind the lemur walk. It's only a small little area, but I'm so happy with how the whole thing turned out. I think it hangs together really nicely. Even the backstage is looking good. You can see where we started today with the real mess of pathing below this area that's been there ever since we built the Indian forest. But now it's all fixed. Really pleased with how this looks, where the 3 areas, Amazonia, the Indian forest and Madagascar, all come together. And that is one of the main things that I want to achieve with this series, is joining up the gaps in the zoo and getting to the stage where we have one whole zoo that fills this part of the map. No gaps, no wasted space, just little areas filling everything in. Plus, of course, building the frozen north, which is the final big area to go into the zoo, which we'll be getting to very soon. Let's check out the members monolith. Thank you as always to all of you who have joined. Hit the join button on the channel if you want to see your name in San Bernardino Zoo. Don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next week for some more Planet Zoo. Thanks for watching.